Let's now have a look at our doseBadge5 system and how you connect it to NoiseTools to download all of the data that you've got on each of the dosimeters, and also how to configure the doseBadge5s. So we've still got your docking station connected to power, so it's powering up. These are still merrily charging away. So what you need is to get your USB cable, connect it into your PC, and then plug it into the far side of your docking station. So what will happen is, as soon as you've done that, after a couple of seconds, then NoiseTools will detect that it's got a doseBadge5 system connected, and it'll pop up on your screen just like this. So we've got a docking station here. It's detected 3 dosimeters, as you can see, 1, 2, 3. And then to get a more detailed view of this, just click the View button. You'll get a nice little picture popping up which tells you everything you need to know. So this mirrors what's on my desk here. So you can see I've got 3 dose badges, you can see the serial numbers, and also it tells you quite instantly how much charge you've got left on each dosimeter, 40% on one, 99% on one, etc., and how much memory capacity you've got left, 90%, 100%, 93%, which is really, really handy to see straight away. And as you can see, for each of these individual dosimeters, we have a number of functions that we can use for each one. So let's take the one on the end here, MK500106. We can download the data, we can configure the data, we can start a measurement, or we can use measurements to go and hunt for any previous measurements in the past. So as I mentioned earlier, the doseBadge5 has quite a lot of different functionality from our original doseBadge, which makes it really easy to use and quite powerful. So the first thing we're going to do is actually not look at the downloading of the data, but let's look at the configuration, because that way I can talk you through some of the functions that are in there which may be of interest for you to use. So we'll take this one, the first one here. I'm going to click on Configure, and here it's telling us a little bit about that particular unit. So it's called MK500106. It tells us the model type, the current time that's in the dosimeter, and again, if you hover somewhere near that, you can click on this little clock which will sync the time on your PC to the time in the dosimeter, the doseBadge5. That's a quick way of changing the time and date. It tells us when it was last recalibrated. In this case, it's never been recalibrated. This is just a one we've just taken out of stock to have a look at, but that should be the day, or very close to the day, that it was shipped from Cirrus Research. We're on the first tab of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tabs. The first tab is a storage tab, and what this is going to let us do is to change a couple of things to do with how we store the data and how we can actually schedule a start and stop time for a particular dosebadge. So the time history rate is currently set to 1 second, but if you don't want that and you think that's too much data, you can change it to a minute. Any changes you do make in here, of course, you click on Save to Instrument at the bottom of this window, and that will save any changes that you've made back to the instrument. Also on the storage page, you can schedule your measurements. Now this is a very powerful tool that I mentioned in the previous section, so that you don't actually have to be there to start and stop the instrument, start and stop the measuring. You can get it to do it automatically. So if we click on Schedule Instruments, turn it on, you can see there that I've got every day of the week selected. So what that means is I'm going to do the same thing on every day of the week. So if I click on Add a Measurement, I can set a start time and I can set a duration. So I can click OK, and there's what I've got set up. If I want to edit this, I can just click on the Edit button and I can go back in there and change those times. If I want to add a pause, for example, you may want to pause it for an hour at lunchtime. It's up to you if you want to do that. You can add a pause. So I can start between 1 and 2, duration an hour. I've added a pause. So I've got this set up, and I'm doing this for every day of the week. That means that somebody can come in, pick up a dosebadge before the start time at 9 o'clock, and then it will automatically start recording. And then whether they still got it on their person or they've put it back on the docking station, it will automatically stop here at 5 o'clock with a pause between 1 and 2. That's what this is doing. If you don't want the pause at any time, you can just get rid of it. And you can then, for those same days, add a second measurement in for the day. So if you could have a one between 9 and 5, and maybe there's an evening shift comes in between 7 and 10, you could add another measurement for each of those days. And then you can select which of those days this actually applies to by clicking on how many days it actually applies to. So it doesn't actually go off on every day of the week. So it's a very simple way of setting up a schedule, very powerful. Again, if you want to save what you've done, click Save to Instrument, and that scheduled timer will get downloaded to the doseBadge5, and then you can then it will automatically start doing this scheduled start and stop. The last thing on this particular tab is clearing the memory. So as I said earlier, these doseBadge5 units will collect multiple measurements one after the other, day after day. So you can keep on adding measurements in there. Eventually it will get full. So if you want to clear the memory, you can click on Clear Memory here. If I do that, it will always ask you, are you sure you want to clear the memory? And then if you say yes, great, it'll clear the memory. If you say no, then it won't clear the memory, but it gives you an option just in case you press that button by mistake. So that's the storage tab. The next one is integrating, and this is where you can set your doseBadge up depending on the territory that you're in. So the way these things are normally set up is we have what's called an ISO LEQ integrator, which basically means it's correct for Europe and the UK. And we have 4 different integrators, so we can have 4 different sets of basically calculated data in here. So I usually have integrator 2 set to the C-weighted average, LCEQ, which is a useful one to have. And then you've got another 2 integrators here, which you can use for OSHA or MSHA or another territory's specification. So you can have a lot of different settings in here. Now, most people just use the one setting and they're happy with that. But you could have some companies where they need to measure one way for the country that they're in, but because they're a multinational, then they also need that data to be calculated for another region or another region's sort of style, so to speak. So that's why there are multiple integrators built into our doseBadges. And if any of those standard integration settings are not what you need, then you can select your own integrator settings on the right-hand side and use those. And of course, if you make any changes, again, click Save to Instrument. Peak and max. This is a way where you can actually set, if you want maximums or peaks, you can set what they are. So you can add a different peak, for example, a Z-weighted or an A-weighted peak to this. It'll calculate that for you. The standard usually is the C-weighted peak value, but you can add different peaks and maxes in if you need to do that. So you can collect a lot more information from the doseBadge5 than you can from our original doseBadges. If I showed you the wand or the remote earlier, here it is here. If you want to use this to communicate with your device, and there's a separate section on this in the videos, you can define what you want to see on these screens, because there's basically 4 screens or so that come up with this, and if you decide you want to change what's on those screens, you can do that within this settings. And then whenever you click Save to Instrument, the instrument will send the right data to the remote or the wand to show the data that you want on it. So it's there if you need that to be amending. Finally, the Advanced tab. And this is where you can set the calibration level of your dosimeters. Usually when they come out to the factory, it's 114 dB. We have this particular one set to 94. It's usually one or the other. If you buy a standard set from us and it comes with its own calibrator, it'll usually be set to 114, but if you need to change it, you can change it in here. This is also where you can set the tamper detection. Now, as I mentioned earlier, dosimeters, if you knock them, there's a chance that they could generate a high noise level. And with older dosimeters, you've got no way of knowing whether that was a genuine noise or it was somebody genuinely just tapping it as they're going about their normal work. But with tamper detection, there's an accelerometer in these dosimeters which detects movement or sharp staccato movements or knocks. And you can set the tamper detection threshold. So you've got 3 options, or 4 options actually. You turn it off, you'll have low sensitivity, medium sensitivity or high sensitivity. And that's, I usually set it to medium, but depending on the way people are working, you might want to change that. And that will, on the, when you download the data, it'll identify any areas in the time history where the actual instrument has been knocked. And if, for example, that detection of a tamper coincides with a high noise level, then you've got a fair chance of knowing or understanding that it's not a real noise level, it's because somebody has knocked the device. So it's really, really useful. But it's up to you whether you turn it on or not. We also have a dose exceedance warning in here, and that's basically saying if 100% of the ISO LEQI, the UK or European values, which is basically 85 decibels, is breached, then it will warn you with a flashing red light. And you can change that percentage all the way down to 75%. So you could get an early warning with a flashing red light on the front of these dose badges when somebody has or is about to breach their noise level total for the day, their dosage. So that's also a useful function. These devices communicate to the remote or to the app that we have for it with Bluetooth. Some sites don't allow Bluetooth connectivity on there, so if you need to turn the Bluetooth connectivity off, you can do it within this setup here. And then also we have octave band measurements. So this is just like a sound level meter where we're splitting the frequency components up into 10 separate frequency bands. It's very useful for collecting that. If you collect that information, it's very useful for defining the correct type of hearing protection. It's a really, really useful tool for doing that. It's the most accurate method of defining the correct hearing protection for the environment that you've measured. And that's and you set that up by enabling octave band measurements. The only warning sign I would give you about this is that that does take a bit more power to generate all of those octave band measurements, all that octave band data. So it does reduce the runtime from about 20 hours down to probably about 12. So just be careful if you turn that on and you want somebody to wear it for a long time, you just got to be careful with that. But you can turn it on or off, it's up to you. And then finally on this page we've got enable transport mode. And what's all that about, I hear you ask? Well, as these dosimeters are sat here now, they're charging up. And because there are no buttons, no on-off buttons, basically they are constantly looking out for communication with the device through Bluetooth. So they want to know whether there's something trying to stop it or start it or communicate to it in some way. And if you charge these up and then you put them in your car and you take them on a long journey, all of that knocking around will just keep them awake. Because once they're nice and quiet and nothing's happening, they'll go into sort of sleep mode. And to get them out of sleep mode, you just pick them up and give them a little shake and they come awake again. That way, because they go into sleep mode, then you're saving battery. But if you're transporting them and you're not going to use them for a couple of days and they've been in the car all the time, because they keep waking up to see if anybody's communicating with them, then you might find that the batteries have it's used a bit of the battery life up. So if you enable transport mode, it basically puts them permanently to sleep. And the only way to re-enliven them again is to put them on a powered docking station and then they'll go back to normal. So that's what transport mode does. It's basically a way of saving battery if you're due to transport them for any long distance or any long period of time. So basically that's all of the functionality in the configuration. You can actually basically save all that configuration to a file using the backup and restore function down here. So if I click on that, you can back up the settings to a file, somewhere on your disk, and then you can restore the settings and download them to that badge if you've got a number of people using these in different ways all the time. Most people tend to, once they're set, that's it, they leave it as it is. So that's basically the functionality in the configuration option. Okay, so we've now configured one of these dose badges, and let's say you've set this first badge, sort of 106, up, and you want to set up all the other ones the same. Now, to make that a bit easier, what you can do is highlight 106 and then use this transfer settings button here, and that will transfer all the settings you've just gone through in the configuration in badge 106 to all of the other badges that are in the docking station. It's just a way of saving time in setting up the configuration, which could be quite handy.